Hi everybody, I'm Ty Landrum and I'm here at Purple Valley Yoga Center with my friend Sam Silversides, and we are going to talk with you a little bit about Surya Namaskar, the sun salutation, particularly as we do it in Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga. So the sun salutation is really a breathing practice that helps to stretch, to extend, and also to balance the opposing forces of expansion and contraction that are incident in the breath. So the sequence that we're about to show you, it integrates breathing with movement. In fact, that the breath is the sort of animating force behind the sequence, and the particular ways in which we move through the sequence give expression to the expansive and contractive forces, respectively. So the expansive movement of the breath is the movement that's associated with inhaling, and the force that underlies that breath is called prana. And the contractive movement of the breath is the movement that's associated with exhaling, and the underlying subtle force that orchestrates that process is known as apana. And what we want to do is not simply to sort of move in an oscillating way between pranic and apanic expressions, but we want to start to feel viscerally the way that these two patterns interpenetrate. So these two patterns are mutually dependent, and they're mutually supportive. And what we find through experimentation with sun salutations and related practices is that staying connected to the apanic or dissolving force while inhaling allows the pranic force to come into its natural fullness, to expand much more richly and vibrantly than it otherwise would. And so an image that's often given to make that point is the image of the branches of a tree being able to reach up and branch out only as much as the roots are able to root down and spread themselves into the earth. So similarly, staying connected to the apanic force while inhaling gives a whole new depth and vibrancy to the experience of inhaling. And this is something that we something that you can feel viscerally as you do Surya Namaskar. And similarly, if you stay connected to the open, receptive quality of the inhale while you exhale, or while you give expression to an exhale movement, you'll find that that movement is much fuller and deeper than it otherwise could be. So let's go ahead and start to look at the way that those two patterns of prana and apana, or of inhaling and exhaling, express physiologically in the body. So Sam, would you go ahead and stand for us? Maybe you can face this way like you're in Samasthiti. Okay. So he's not going to take the first position yet. He's just going to stand in a sort of relaxed way. And then he can notice that, and we can notice from the outside just in watching him, that if he takes a deep breath in, there's a lifting and spreading of the rib cage. And especially you can see the lifting and spreading at the plane of the heart. So the front of the rib cage tends to lift up a little bit more than the back of the rib cage. And that's just in part because of the structure of the respiratory diaphragm itself. But you feel that quite viscerally as well when you draw the breath in. You feel this sense of expansion from across the heart. So go ahead and take maybe a bit of an exaggerated inhale so that we can see that movement. Okay. And now Sam's pretty well versed in yogic breathing, and so he's already kind of automatically staying connected to what we call the exhale pattern. But what happens if you, and I'll explain what that means in just a moment, but let's say that you're not connected to the exhale pattern. What happens when you take a deep breath in? Which way does the pelvis tilt? So go ahead. So you'll find that if he doesn't stay super rooted in the lower back and in the feet, and he draws the breath in, the lumbar curve gets accentuated, okay? And we might call that, you might say that the best part of the prana pattern is the lifting and the spreading of the heart. And then the shadow side of that is this sort of closing down on the back of the diaphragm, or closing down on the plane of the kidneys. The kidneys themselves can actually get compressed if that unsupported inhale is pronounced enough. Okay? Now, what about the exhale pattern? As he exhales, and you can just stand normally again and then start to exhale, and you'll notice that whenever he exhales, there's a sense of the rib cage dropping a little bit. I hope you can see that on the camera. And if he doesn't stay connected to that open-hearted, receptive quality of the inhale while he's exhaling, then his posture will start to take a certain definite form. It kind of looks like this. Looks a little rigid, looks a little closed, looks a little crestfallen perhaps. And what's maybe somewhat in certain circumstances desirable about this kind of posture, or what you might say the best part of the exhale pattern is this spreading across the plane of the kidneys, which can help connect you to your kidney chi, your sort of deeper stores of vital force, to have that open. And so this is a very sort of stable and strong position. And it's, of course, it's the kind of, it's a less pronounced version of the kind of position that, say, a linebacker would take. Do you know anything about American football?
Not really.
Okay, well.
We have CFL.
Okay. He's from Canada, so. But anyways, yeah, this sort of a linebacker position, sort of, but, and it's a very strong position. It's very solid. I can give him a little push, and he's quite rooted in that position. And that position really gives expression to an exhale pattern. So you can come back up. But obviously, the shadow side of spreading across the plane of the kidneys is closing down in front of the heart. And that's what gives this posture, this sort of unsupported exhale posture, a look of self-enclosure, of rigidity. And obviously, that's not the kind of mental state that we're going for in yoga. So you can relax again. So the kind of mental state that we're going for in yoga is one that combines the best of the prana and the apana patterns, psychologically speaking. So the best part of the prana pattern is this sort of open-hearted, radiant, receptive quality, an openness to, whatever may be presenting itself in the present moment. And the best part of the aponic breath, or of the aponic force psychologically, is a sense of groundedness, a sense of rootedness. And with that groundedness and rootedness is also an ability to let things go, an ability to be undisturbed by whatever's presenting in the present moment, so that one is not distracted out of the present moment by thinking or spinning off about whatever happens to be presenting. So a sort of short way of saying that is that we're going for a sense of focus that is sort of not too rigid, not too contracted, a sense of focus that is where the attention is sort of, held on that sort of moving point that is the present moment, while being fully receptive to everything that's moving in. This is what we're looking for in yoga, and it's a very fine art to sort of hold and balance these energies of prana and apana in the body, so that those forces are also being held in balance in the mind. And it's a sort of astonishing fact, and one that wakes us up to the mind-body connection when we realize just how potent work it can be to work on this physiological level, to cultivate that state of mindfulness psychologically. Okay, so this is what we're working with, and this is the point, we might say, of doing Surya Namaskar with good alignment, is that it helps to sort of wake us up to the present moment by drawing us into this state of mindfulness as we move and breathe. So let's check out the mechanics of this. So you can go ahead and stand in Samasthiti. So Samasthiti means equal standing. And the idea is that you're standing equally between pranic and aponic forces and holding both of them in a delicate balance. So Sam's not going to just stand in a way that's sort of more or less upright without engaging in either without engaging the pranic or the aponic energies, but instead he's going to engage them both at the same time. So, to put it most simply, he's going to spread the back of the diaphragm and lift the heart at the same time. And when he does that, you'll notice that there's a sense of upward movement right through the midline. It's as if he gets taller, and there's a sense of as if something in him has been quickened, and he looks more alert, more awake, and sort of ready. But he's also this position is sort of neutral in a certain way between pranic and aponic expressions. And in fact, it's the only position in the entire Ashtanga syllabus that doesn't have a particular breath, that is an inhale or an exhale, that's prescribed for moving into it. Okay, you can move into it on an inhale or an exhale, and that's precisely because it's ideally a perfectly balanced form. So in Samasthiti, the big toes are touching, the heels are slightly apart, because that helps to create a certain sense of narrowing in the front of the pelvis. For most of us, the tendency is to be a little too pranic, to have a little too much curve in the lumbar spine, even if we lift the heart way up. Okay, so turning the legs in like this can help us find a little bit of tone in front of the belly that helps us lift the belly. Now that doesn't make us more aponic yet, but Sam will engage the backs of the legs and lift his hamstrings, and that'll pull the sitting bones down so the pelvis comes into an upright position. And then he's balancing that movement with drawing in here in the front of the belly. And so there's a sense of the belly sort of lifting and floating, and then the heart lifts and floats above the belly, okay? And so he's just feeling into that balance. And Sam is probably noticing that as he inhales, there's a tendency for the heart to lift and for the pelvis to move forward. And so he's making subtle adjustments as he's breathing to give this sort of illusion of stillness, but it's not still at all. He's sort of calibrating and recalibrating continuously these more subtle internal movements in order to breathe deeply and hold himself in this same form. As he exhales, there's a tendency for the heart to drop, so he's keeping the heart lifted, and so that he stays connected to the prana pattern even as he exhales. Now the breath that one technique that he's using, which you might be able to hear it through my microphone, but there's a sort of aspirant sound that he's making with his breath. Bringing my microphone close to him. Very nice. Okay, and he's making that sound by constricting the vocal cords just a little bit. And you constrict the vocal cords in exactly the same way that you would as if you were whispering. So it's the very same gesture. You just hold the vocal cords as if you were whispering, and then you breathe through the nose. And it makes this sort of hissing or aspirant sound that sort of sounds like wind rustling through the leaves of the jungle. In fact, you can hear a very similar sound happening right now. And the point of that is that it gives a little bit of useful resistance to the diaphragm, so that the diaphragm has to sort of, fully wake up in order to pull the breath through this narrowed passage in the vocal cords. And you don't do it so much that you're like straining to breathe, but you do it just enough that you feel the, slumbering parts of the diaphragm sort of wake up and get involved in creating this inhale breath, okay? And we sustain that. This is called the ujjayi, or the victorious breath. And we sustain we use this technique throughout the entire sun salutation, okay? He's also keeping all of the tension released from the soft palate as he breathes. And it's important to do that because you might make the aspirant sound by holding tension in the soft palate mistakenly. You don't want to do that. You want to keep the soft palate totally released. And by the soft palate, I mean the diaphragm of muscle just above and behind the roof of the mouth. That diaphragm is part of the speech apparatus. It's part of the mechanism by which you turn the subtle vibrations of thought into more palpable vibrations you can send across space and that can be received by other sentient beings as potentially meaningful speech. Whenever you're about to vocalize a thought, you get some tension in the soft palate. And that tension is just part of your readiness to speak. So you'll find that if you release the soft palate, it immediately detaches you it immediately disengages that sort of discursive, that discursive thinking. It immediately gives you a little space from your thoughts, so that even if certain concepts or fragments of thought are coming up, you don't sort of give them the attention that they need to condense and congeal into complete sentences and storylines, okay? So this is a very potent technique, and you can combine it with ujjayi just by feeling the touch of breath sliding across the soft palate and always using that touch of breath as an invitation for you to keep the soft palate widened and released. So this is what Sam is doing as he's breathing, and it's keeping him in this sort of cool, collected state as he waits so patiently for me to get on with it and to move into the first vinyasa. So we can call Samasthiti the 0 position. The first vinyasa is an inhale. So from Samasthiti, Sam's going to inhale and he's going to give expression to that expansive movement of the prana that lifts and spreads from the plane of the heart by reaching the arms up and above the head whenever you're ready. He's going to reach them out a little bit, and then as they come up, he takes the head way back. He reaches up, maybe through the ring finger, super tall, and then exhale. You can just bring the hands back down to the sides. Okay? So do that a few more times. So notice that as Sam brings the arms up, he presses the shoulders forward. And as he presses the shoulders forward, he's basically helping himself to stay connected to the exhale pattern. Why is that? Well, because the serratus anterior, which is this sort of serrated muscle that you can see right here, it's named after its serrated appearance. That muscle goes up underneath the scapula, the shoulder blade, connects to the medial border of the scapula, and when it contracts, it pulls the shoulders forward. It protracts the shoulder blades, which means it brings the shoulder blades away from the spine, creating more space in the front of the back. And then Sam, can you just show us the sort of unsupported apana pattern again, the exhale pattern?
In which position?
Just, you know.
Oh, yes.
So if he's in the linebacker position or in the sort of this very aponic position, you'll notice that the shoulder blades are spread apart. Okay, so one thing that's distinctive of the apana pattern is that there's a spreading of the back of the body. Yeah. And so the aponic lines of support are wrapping toward the front, right? And by contrast, in the prana pattern or the inhale pattern, if you can take maybe something that's expressive of the, there's a closing down in the back of the body and a spreading in the front. Okay? Thanks so much. Okay. Very good. So, to stay connected to the apana pattern while you reach the arms above the head, engage the serratus anterior. That will push the shoulders forward. It also gives more space for the neck. And when you engage, and then hold that, when you engage the apana pattern by connecting with the serratus anterior, that will automatically help you to hollow out here and to keep the pelvis back, which is also part of the apana pattern. So the apana pattern is sort of all coming online a little bit more. He's helping himself get better hip alignment, even just by holding the shoulders in that direction. So if he were to not press the shoulders forward, if he draws them back, it becomes very natural for him to take too pranic of a position in the pelvis, which would be an anterior tilt when the pelvis tilts forward. This is too pranic. And then the posterior tilt, if you could do that, would be sort of to aponic. Okay? So we're going for a balance. Okay, so exhale, bring the hands back down. Okay, so the first position is with the arms lifted above the head. The second position is folding down. Okay, so when we go from the first position to the second position, we're going from a form that was more pranic or more expressive of the inhale pattern to a form that's more aponic or more expressive of the exhale pattern. So the trick to such a move is to stay connected with that sense of openness and receptivity, that sense of length, of expansion, of height that you create with the inhale, even as you exhale and go down into this more aponic form. So I'll describe how Sam's going to do that. First, how about you just show us? You can go for the first position all the way down into the second, and then just stand back up. Okay? So inhale. And exhale. Beautiful. And then just stand back up. Good. Okay. So this is super nice. So he inhales. Now we'll do it in slow motion. He inhales, he reaches the arms up, he presses the shoulders forward, the head goes back, the pelvis stays in an upright position, and he also doesn't push the pelvis forward. He keeps it right over his heels. And now when he starts to exhale, he's going to dive the pubic bone back, and he's going to reach way forward with the hands. See how he's keeping all this length through the waist and through the ribs as he goes down. And then at the bottom, he uses his hands to pull himself in. So he doesn't engage the belly so much. His belly's pretty soft here, but he's using his arms to pull himself deep into the fold. And he's really nice and deep there. You don't have to be able to go that deep, but he's a good assistant. Demonstrator, yeah. So now we'll show you how to go from that second position, which is the forward fold, into the third position. And the third position, well, go ahead and demonstrate going from, so go first position, second position to third position, and then pause. Okay?
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. So inhale, he reaches. Exhale, the pubic bone dives back. He keeps all the length as he goes down. Even his chin is up. His gaze is up as he goes down. Now he goes into the third position. And there's almost a sense of the breath rolling up the front of the spine as he goes to that position. Because of course, and why would that be? Well, just as the inhale pattern is sort of expressed as a radiance from the center of the heart, the exhale pattern is expressed as a contraction into the center of the pelvis, even into the center of the pelvic floor itself. So when he's all the way folded down, you can see now fold down to the second position. There's really like the epicenter of this pose is like deep in the pelvis. You can see how that is. So as he inhales, he's going to roll the breath from the center of the pelvis back up to the heart, creating a nice sense of expansion. So there's a little bit of a rolling action through the spine that he does in going from the second to the third position. So Sam, how about fold back down and then wave up to the third position and then back in just a few times so that they can see what that looks like. Yeah. So his head lifts last. His head lifts at the very end of the inhale. When he first begins the inhale, he sort of rounds the lower back just a little bit more. And then at the very top of the inhale, as he comes up, he lifts the chin and the pubic bone dives back. You can pause there. Okay, this is the third position. Okay, now the fourth position is called Chaturanga. So you can go to Chaturanga. Okay, so this is called Chaturanga, or the four-armed position for obvious reasons, the four-limbed position. Okay, and so this is a difficult one. So the fourth position is basically Samasthiti. It's the first position, all the actions in the belly with the pelvic alignment on the backs of the legs, pulling the sitting bones down, but keeping the heart open and the collarbones rolled back at the same time brings that balance of pranic and aponic forces. His elbows are back a little bit behind his wrists, although some people insists that they should be directly above the wrists, but we sort of have a different perspective on that. No problem. And he doesn't go down so low that his shoulders start to lean forward like this, because that would put too much pressure on the biceps tendons. But instead, so come back into it. Instead, he goes down just enough. And this is just enough. It's perfect. And you can either have the head lifted up looking forward a little, or you can look down at the ground like that. Okay, as you were. Very good, thank you. So again, just think of Chaturanga like Samasthiti. Think of the alignment cues that we gave in the first position, apply them to the fourth position, and you'll do great. It's a very difficult position, and so if you're trying sun salutation for the first time at home, you might find that you don't have the strength to hold it for very long, but don't worry, you don't have to hold it for as long as Sam did. All you do is exhale down, and then you inhale and you get out of there. If you have to bring the knees all the way down to the floor, no problem, and we'll show you how to do that, how to modify that in just a moment. But let's show you next where you go from the fourth position into the fifth position. So the fifth position is the well-known upward-facing dog. And so just give us a demonstration of going from Chaturanga to upward-facing dog. Beautiful. And then you can go back to Chaturanga. Just go back to Chaturanga. And then to upward dog again. Good. And that's enough demonstration. And then just be at rest for a moment. You can just lie on your belly or whatever's comfortable for you. Okay? So in going from the fourth position to the fifth position, in other words, in going from Chaturanga to upward dog, the movement is just like the movement of going from the second position to the third position. So you've gone into this very aponic form. Chaturanga's, even though it's much like Samasthiti, it's quite aponic because you have to hold yourself. So you really have to tighten up the aponic elements of the form much more than the pranic ones in order to keep yourself from collapsing down in the field of gravity, which is immediately obvious to anyone who gives it a try. But so when you come up into that position, it's nice to find a little sense of rolling the breath up the front of the spine again, of lifting the apana up to unite with the prana, which is, expanding from the heart, and you sort of, can feel them uniting toward the center of the body. But you can trace the breath all the way up, and if you do, and with a sort of rolling action in the spine, and doing that kind of action will help clear excess vata from the spine, so it makes the spine far more supple in time, because you're articulating every bone in the back as you go into it. But mostly, and maybe even more importantly, when you do the transition in this way, you stay connected to the aponic force. You stay connected to the rooting force, to the grounding force of the breath. And if you do that, you'll find, probably to your great surprise, that the inhale can be so much fuller and richer and deeper. Whereas if you pull with your head and you don't stay connected to the aponic elements of the form, you'll feel that the breath is really short. It feels like it gets cut off at the diaphragm. So can you give us a demonstration of the breath cutting off at the diaphragm by just pulling from Chatwari to Urdhva Mukha? Right, and this is a really common, so try to breathe there. He can't breathe. And this is a very common experience, I think, for many people coming into upward facing dogs.
Especially if they try to keep that right angle in Chaturanga Dandasana, right?
Yeah, if you try to keep the right angle in Chaturanga Dandasana, it's harder to find the rolling action. It's also arguably not so good on your shoulders, especially it's fine if you're just holding Chaturanga Dandasana, but if you're going into that position doing this movement repetitively for many, many years, you can put a lot of unnecessary wear and tear on the shoulder joints by holding your elbows at a 90-degree angle in Chaturanga. So it's for those reasons that we would recommend an angle that is maybe not so, in other words, don't have your weight quite so forward. So there's a lot more that can be said about this particular transition, ways to refine it and so forth, but we're just sort of roughing it out here. Maybe we'll just talk about, let's talk about the alignment of the neck. So notice that the way that Sam's doing this here, and it can be done in different ways, but I asked him before we did this video to come into it with the head just looking straight forward. And that's because, oftentimes we tend to come into upward facing dog and throw the head way back and we're sort of, pushing the pelvis down into the floor and trying to get the heart really open and taking the head really back. And all of this is just way too much prana. It's not a balanced form. So in order to bring more of the aponic elements into the form, we need to soften the musculature that's squeezing across the sacrum. So the backside is, I'm not saying it's completely inactive, but you definitely don't want to squeeze the musculature around the sacrum in an effort to push the hips closer to the floor. Instead, push the tops of the feet into the floor, and if you can, lift the knees. Sam's got his knees lifted, but really close to the floor because he's got a pretty deep back bend. And then, you don't have to squeeze this musculature in the low back, but it engages a little bit because you also are engaging in the front of the belly as if you're lifting the belly up. So the belly's nice and high, right? And his shoulders come back, but then he's going to spread across the occipital base of the skull. He's going to spread wide here, and then, now you can come down. It was a long time to hold that. Because when you spread wide across the occipital base of the skull, it helps you to relax the soft palate, okay? And another thing that helps you release that musculature across the occipital base of the skull is to drop your gaze down a little bit. So although there's nothing inherently wrong with taking the eyes way up and throwing the head back in upward facing dog, and of course that's, you might experience that as quite natural, you might also experiment with spreading wide across the occipital base of the skull and feeling and keeping the gaze down or straight forward and feeling a bit more of a release from the soft palate. So that when you come up into the position, and this is fine, we can do it from here, and you feel all of that prana lifting and spreading above the crown of the head, creating a sort of, as if the hood of a serpent, which is a traditional image, by the way, for representing the lifting and spreading pattern of prana. You want the prana to curl back and move back toward the heart. And so you can visualize that in the upward facing dog. You can visualize the prana curling back on the soft palate across the inner surface of the skull and perhaps even higher overhead, curling back so that all of that upward moving energy is being returned back to the subtle body via the heart. So that's a rich topic, and there's a lot more that could be said about that. But for now, just sort of experiment with that imagery and with that feeling and see if you connect with that intuitively, if that doesn't sort of change the feeling of upward facing dog for you in an illuminating way. Okay? So now, going from upward facing dog to downward facing dog, or from the 5th position to the 6th position, is very, very similar to going from the 1st position down to the 2nd. So in the 1st position, we created this very pranic, expansive gesture, the form, and then to come down, Sam dived his pubic bone back, but kept all the length through the waist, through the ribs. He kept his chin up, he kept his gaze up until he was pretty much all the way into the form. So similarly, coming from upward dog to downward dog, Sam's going to do this. Beautiful. So see, he initiated the movement from the hips, he dove the pubic bone back, he kept all the length through the waist, through the rib cage, he kept the chin up, he kept the gaze up until he came all the way back into the sixth position, which is called downward facing dog. Can you show us that one more time, Sam?
You bet.
So here's upward dog. He exhales as he does it. So don't hold your breath and go back and then exhale, but allow the exhale to be the animating force behind the breath. So you feel that aponic breath spiraling down back down from the heart toward the pelvis, and you let it suck you back. And it's sort of like, he rode the wave up into upward facing dog, and then he pulls back, and as the head drops down as his hips come up over the crest of the wave again, he drops his head back down into the trough, okay? So one more time, Sam, please. So watch him slowly. We'll go, how about Chaturanga to upward dog and then downward dog? So he waves up, beautiful, and then exhale back. And then as he's holding, so what we do in downward dog, we usually hold downward dog for 5 breaths. You could hold it for a little longer if you like, but 5 breaths is the sort of conventional standard. And you'll notice that as Sam's breathing, he's basically reiterating those same undulating actions through the spine that were incident in all of the previous vinyasa, okay? So he's not holding the posture so rigidly that he starts to interfere with his breath. And in fact, if you were just to hold it perfectly still, you hear his breath automatically get strained, right? And it's not very smooth, it's not very deep anymore. It's sort of labored and shortened. So now allow yourself to move naturally with the breath again. Okay, and this is the point. The point is not to make some dramatic, extroverted, showy undulation with the spine, but just to allow the spine to be supple enough to move naturally with the very naturally undulating currents of the breath. That's the point. So he might even visualize as he's doing this, as he inhales, he might imagine the breath coming from the arches of the feet up. Here we go. Comes from the arches of the feet up the spine toward the heart, and then as he exhales, he lets the breath slide down the arms from the heart back into the fingertips. Okay? And so now he's sort of exaggerating it just to show you, but now just do it as you normally would. That was beautiful. Thank you. Okay. So he's been here for like 30 breaths now or something. Usually you just take 5. And so after 5 breaths, he's going to exhale all the way out, and then you can just step forward, or you can hop. Well, yeah. And then you inhale back into what is essentially the 3rd position. But here we call it the 7th position, but it's the same, okay? And then the 8th position, he exhales down into what was essentially the same as the 2nd position. And then number 9, he inhales back up into the 1st position. And then exhale, he returns to the 0 position. Beautiful. So now let's let Sam demonstrate a full version of Surya Namaskar, or 2. Why don't you do 2 of them? Take 5 breaths in each one. And I'll step out of the frame so that you can just watch Sam do Surya Namaskar in real time, as he would. So ekam, inhale. Dve, exhale. Trini, inhale. Chatwari, exhale. Pancha, inhale. And Shat, exhale. One. 2. 3. 4. And 5. Exhale all the way to empty. Then jump forward or step to your feet. Inhale, chin up. Sapta. Ashto, exhale, fold. Nava, inhale. And exhale, Samasthiti. Good. And you can float on this one if you like. Ekam, inhale. Dve, exhale. Trini, inhale. And Chatwari, exhale. Pancha, inhale. And Shat, exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Sapta, inhale. Ashto, exhale. Nava, inhale. And exhale, Samasthiti. Beautiful. So thank you so much, Sam. We hope that this video on Surya Namaskar, on sun salutation, serves you. If you're just learning this, then you can maybe make a practice of doing maybe 10 repetitions, kind of like Sam just did. And of course, don't be discouraged if yours doesn't look like Sam's. He's been doing this for a long time, every day, and he's gotten quite good at it. So don't be discouraged, just do the best you can. And thank you.